Okay, so I'm guessing you all have heard of ISIS, or ISIL, or IS, or Daesh, or whatever they're being called at this very moment. Because of recent events, both last week in San Bernardino and in Paris and Damascus and across the Middle East before, they've come onto the national stage, if they could even be even more on the national stage than they were already. Now everybody is talking about ISIS. What I'm here to do is convince you that we need to take strong military action against ISIS, and our current strategy is not working. Now, to defeat ISIS, what the U.S. and our allies need to do is not just attack them from the air, but also defeat them militarily on the ground, and also focus on the differences between ISIS and other terrorist groups, and focus on these differences and use them as a way to exploit the weaknesses that are in them, so that we can undermine their ideology and defeat them. Now, first let's learn what makes the enemy different from Al-Qaeda or the Taliban, and why this is important. Graham Wooden, a writer for The Atlantic, wrote a huge article for their March cover called What ISIS Really Wants. And in it, he interviewed several Muslim scholars, security experts, and even a few ISIS sympathizers in the UK, which was a very interesting experience for him. They were very nice people, apparently, but there was something a little off about them. I mean, obviously, they had to be nice if they are out in the public in the UK. So otherwise, they would have gotten arrested, which actually one of them did, but that's another story. So what he found out is that ISIS has very specific theological rules that make them, well, in their own minds, a legitimate caliphate. And what a caliphate is basically what they call themselves an Islamic state, and it's supposed to be like the only Islamic state in the world. And according to them, all Muslims have to align themselves with them or be declared apostates, which is punishable by death. Like that's one of the highest crimes according to them. And furthermore, anybody who aligns themselves with any nation or believes themselves to be a citizen of any nation is considered an apostate. So bad thing about that is they're the enemy of every civilization and nation on earth by that. But the good thing is they're the enemy of every civilization on earth, so they can't have any allies. Literally, no country can align themselves with them without, their rulers stepping down completely and submitting themselves to ISIS. Another theological rule that they have to abide by, which makes them different from past terrorist groups, is that they have to have physical territory in their control. When we invaded Afghanistan in 2001 to fight against the Taliban and Al-Qaeda, they eventually were able to go operate underground, and the fight became really hard. The weakness of every normal army is generally guerrilla warfare and like insurgency type warfare. ISIS, if they decide to go underground, according to their own rules, they are not a legitimate caliphate. Now, my point in explaining all this to you is, a lot of people talk about undermining their theology or their ideology online, fighting them on Twitter, all this kind of stuff, and it's a lot of talk, and some of them are good ideas, but probably the best and easiest way and most effective way to undermine their ideology would be, by their own definition, making them illegitimate. If you make them break their own rules, you can break the primary motivation for people wanting to join them, like what we saw last week, even in our own state. Now, how this can be exploited militarily, we have the entire world, for the most part, all of NATO, that can be aligned with us. And because ISIS has made this huge error in deciding to, or not deciding, but having themselves be more traditional, if you can call it traditional, in their position as a terrorist group or a nation, this puts the U.S. at a huge advantage over them and gives us a major opportunity to take them out. Now I'm going to move on to why our current strategy is not working. Now, countless retired U.S. defense officials and generals have all said that the current administration strategy is not working. One of the plans and tactics or strategies we were using previously, or trying to use, was to train rebels in Iraq and Syria, and specifically Kurds. And there was until recently, there was a $500 million plan in place to help train. The goal was 5,000 rebels in Iraq to fight ISIS. After several months, guess how many they came up with? 4. They missed their mark by over 4,999. Or not 99, 95. Sorry about that. And now to counter some arguments against this. When people like Senator John McCain or many others say boots on the ground, for the most part, we're not talking about a huge, massive ground operation like we saw in Iraqi Freedom or Desert Storm. What a lot of them are talking about is using special forces units to attack locations or facilities, and also to help aid in airstrikes, having them eyes on the ground to make sure airstrikes are more accurate and minimize civilian casualties. When currently we don't really have very many trained eyes on the ground. So with the current tactic, there's an even greater risk of civilian casualties, which could potentially be really counterproductive for obvious reasons. You don't want to be killing civilians when you're trying to help them, convince them to join your side, if they are in fact sympathizers. If not, then you're just killing innocent lives for no reason whatsoever. And that being said, you have to have the new strategy will have to have a little bit of nuance to it. It can't be a whole like what Donald Trump is advocating. We're gonna bomb the shit out of them. Okay, we're gonna it's gonna be amazing. We're gonna do great things. Can't be like that. We have to be strategic. Like Bush said, strategery. And you have to be but you can't micromanage it. It has to be very well balanced. And definitely not like a bunch of, talk about undermining ideology. Like, here's what we're gonna do. We're going to, we have to fight their ideology. That's not who we are. Going in and bombing them and killing innocent civilians, that's not who we are. We have to be dedicated, but patient, and we can't waver from our goal as a nation and as a world. This is a fight that will take a great deal of effort and sacrifice on the part of every nation of the world. The complexities of this fight seem beyond many of us to realize, or to understand, to understand. But at least we as students, the least we could do is make our voices heard, elect the people you believe can do the right thing, call your congressman or senator, make your voice heard, and maybe, just maybe, we'll turn this fight around and the world will be a lot safer than it is today. Thank you.
So Evan, what did you think?
I thought the topic was clear and you seemed really knowledgeable on the subject matter. And you had a really good eye contact even though you had a podium and you had some notes on the podium. And I think you could have used more stats or quote. And overall, your speech was good. And in conclusion, I thought you should have preview your main points in the conclusion. And overall, I thought it was a really good speech.
Okay. The reference to the organization at the beginning is pretty clear. I know what your goal is. That part's well laid out. The preview I thought was a lot more subtle, and I'm not exactly sure how it ultimately develops, although I do seem to see some sense of movement as you're going through the points. I don't think you were just wandering on the topic. The opening depends a lot on your summary of the article in Atlantic, and I think you need more direct quotes from that. You're kind of paraphrasing ideas that are going on there, but you're not telling us the details. You're not providing the backup, and I think that that's one of the problems that happens throughout the presentation is you've done some reading, you've got some information, you've got opinions, but we're not getting the same references to the materials that you had. We're having to rely on you as being the gatekeeper, in essence, between that information and us. And I think that that's a little bit problematic if you're not going to give us specific source citations. The theory of legitimacy as a basis of attacking ISIS, I thought was an interesting one. Denying them territory, taking away any control of any area, I think is an interesting point. I suspect that there are people who advocate that policy for the very reason that you're talking about. It would be nice if they were credible sources and it's not just your inference that's being made here. So you mentioned at one point there are retired military people, there are people who study security issues who are suggesting these kinds of things, but you never tell us who any of those folks are, and you're not quoting people directly. Again, we're getting the kind of the summarized content that's going on there. I thought you'd do a nice Trump and a pretty good Bush, but your Obama is really solid.
Yeah.
All right, that's good. So a little subtle, but I got it. I know what was going on there. I think at the end you kind of go to solutions that this audience can participate in, and I'm not exactly sure that that's a necessary element. I think you need to sharpen and hone on what the general issue is. And it's a little surprising, since we did get a speech last night from the president on these issues, that there's not really any reference to that. It's an updated thing, and it's constantly evolving subject, so you probably want to have the most recent stuff included in the presentation also. Although he didn't really say anything different.
No.